What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the LifeWarrior podcast. Haven't done one in a while. We've been moving. There's a lot of things going on, so I'm glad to be back. Today, I have Miss Michelle Chapa. I met Michelle in Houston at an event we were at, and it was just by chance that we met, talking about conflicts and struggles we've been through, and that's the reason we were both there at this event. And so met her, talked with her about what she does and why she's there. Michelle is one of the founding members of Texas Crime Victims United, and she's going to tell that story here of why they founded this thing and what they do. But Michelle, like most people, has a life warrior story. I always say the real thing that binds everybody in the world is not necessarily happiness or anything like that. It's conflict and struggle. There's nobody that goes through life, lives a life, and doesn't face conflict or struggle of some form that alters the course of your life in a major way. And so it doesn't matter where you go, where you live. People from Peru to Chile to Australia, wherever, go through the same things we go through here. And so the message for us here at Life Warrior, as always, is that you can go through conflict and struggle in a major way and you can get out of it. So Michelle's going to tell her story about what she went through in her life, because there's somebody out there right now living through the things that she lived through, similar, and maybe they're finding a way to get out of it. So that's what we're going to do here. So Michelle, welcome to the Life Warrior podcast. Thanks for coming on. It was awesome to meet you and your husband. Your husband's a funny dude.
He's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Uh, as he's an engineer, correct? Am I right?
Building engineer.
Yeah. So yeah, engineers are always they got a special way about them. My
Yeah,
brother's one. My brother's one too. So, uh, but I like both of you in the sense that I think we're alike in that we try to cut through the bullshit, and we're just if it's in here, it's probably gonna come out here,
for sure.
regardless of regardless of whether it's the right time or place or
There might
what.
have a between here and here, but it's
Yeah, yeah, and that's good. That's the way I like it. That's the way I feel like that's something we're missing in the world now. Anyway, everybody
on.
wants to dance around everybody's feelings and all of that. So I feel like we're in the same sense. So Michelle, we talked before about where we were going to go with this, and you said you wanted to kind of start from the beginning with the abusive stuff that you went through even before the violent crime stuff. So I'll let you talk about that. Go
Okay.
ahead.
My name is Michelle Chapa. I am from Houston. I've been here my whole life. Moved here when, I was a year old. Didn't live in the best side of town, and started witnessing violence very early on, losing friends as early as the age of 13 to very violent crime. And then as I got out of high school, I wanted to move. I wanted to start over. So I did. I moved to Austin, where my sister was going to UT. And I met my ex-husband young. We were married. Everything was great for a couple of years. He did have issues with substance abuse, and ended up in a very violent marriage for a long time. Um, I grew up with my dad. My dad was the single dad of my sister and I, and he always taught us to be very strong and very independent. And so being in that type of situation was very embarrassing for myself. I always felt like I was a strong woman, I was independent, I could handle myself, and I never did ask for help. I never told my friends and family what was going on. At the time, we had moved to Dallas. We were away from everybody, all of our family. We were living in a bubble away from my safety net. And I felt like the way to stay alive was to stay, and that I could tolerate, I can take it. I've been through some stuff. I can take it. I didn't want to hurt him, kind of thing. Like the victim mentality started taking over, until it didn't.
Yeah.
when it escalated and it got to the point where I could no longer control myself from defending myself, um, I heard him back, and I knew it was time to leave. And so when I did, that was 13 years that I did that, and I kind of swallowed my pride, tucked my tail, moved back to Houston, and had to tell my dad what I'd been going through. And
So he had no idea.
I had no idea.
Oh
Uh,
boy, as a father, I
it was,
bet he was devastated and angry, and
yes,
I
yes.
know the feelings I would be going through. Yes.
Yes, yes,
Mm.
you're beautiful. Good luck. And I
uh,
would you.
yeah.
That.
Mm.
But yeah, no, he was very upset, very disappointed. Um, he didn't blame me at all,
Right.
very supportive, but he was disappointed that I didn't come to him sooner. And that was a turning point in me to know that when I need help, I need to ask for it. There's no shame in asking for help. And so it really changed my way of thinking about things of just like, if it's wrong, fix it. If you need help, ask for it. Closed mouths don't get fed. And so I could have saved myself sooner had I asked for the help that I thought I wouldn't get. A lot of it was, I don't know if my family would accept this. Are they going to blame me? And so I just never did ask for help. And then you always think like, well, if I forgive him, they won't. So then it's going to be, family Christmas is going to be awkward because everybody hates him and I chose to stay here. So I just all these reasons that I chose to never ask for help until I finally did. And I had the support of my family to, pick back up and start over. And at the time I was self-employed. I didn't have benefits. I really wanted to just start another life, start a new career, not be self-employed. I don't know why I decided I wanted to join the corporate world, but I went in face first. And I
How old were you at this time?
34.
So you were 34, yeah. So you'd been through it. You'd been through it a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, all of my 20s
Yeah.
and my early 30s. And so I've always been a fan of technology and things around me. Back in the day when iPhones were just little gadgets, I learned
Yeah.
how to hack into an iPhone and jailbreak them and create custom themes and all this kind of stuff. I was always a fan of Apple, and so I decided that I would apply to work at AT&T. And I did. I started as just a regular sales rep in a store. Um, Dedicated myself to my job, very quickly moved up, and then I was managing stores around Houston for AT&T, and I would move every couple of years. And they opened a new store in the Heights that is typically a really nice area, and I was excited to move to a beautiful store. It was a big store. It was new. I could really make a footprint with this store. And what I didn't realize at the time is that the location, while it's not a bad area, the location was bad. It was right on the corner of, the feeder road and a main street in Houston. That highway there on 610, you're two exits away from 45, three exits away from the Hardy, two exits back to 290. Like it was an easy on, easy off access to the store. And we quickly realized that it was going to be a high crime location. Um, that started with overnight break-ins, and then it started with snatch and grabs, and within a year we started having armed robberies, um, and over the course of 2 years there were 13 armed robberies, and some of them were very violent. um, i I definitely have the mom gene. At the time my son was young. He was 4 years old. My sales reps that work for me were young kids. They're 20, 21 years old, just starting out their own life too. And I spent more time with my sales reps than I ever did my actual family. I'm at this store 10 to 12 hours a day,
Right.
5 days a week, and they became my family. These reps were my other kids. I still have relationships with them to this day, and as a mother figure. And so
Yeah.
to see them go through that, it it clicked in my mind to be a savior. And I would always put myself in front of them. I would always try to distract everybody. And I have the code to the safe. I have the keys to the doors. Like, come with me, leave them here. And to have to see them be so scared and so
Yeah.
traumatized, and the injuries, just even the sight, the smell of blood, the tears, the first responders being there, the whole process, it was wearing on me.
Yeah.
Spend so much time trying to, again, be strong for everybody else. I never took the time to really um, deal with it personally.
Yeah.
And
So, uh, you talking about that? I going through my stuff that I went through in the fire department. Same kind of deal where it's crazy when now, and I'm sure it's still that way for you. The sensory things, the smell of blood, or and I can see it because I know I do the same things. Like when people like you and you're talking about it now, and I see it, and I'm sure you do too. When people start talking about their stuff, the mannerisms and the movements and the facial expressions, it it that's one of those things that people don't understand. And I read your thing that you sent me, is that people don't understand that stays, it does stay with you, and no matter how much you put the smile on and all that, and you can fight through it, it's right, it's still there and you can't get
yeah,
rid of it.
it doesn't
Yeah.
take much to progress back to the very time that it happened.
Yeah.
And it changed me very deeply. There's so many different instances that people end up with PTSD. And I was already still trying to recover from the abusive marriage I was in. I was still going through the divorce. It was very ugly. So I was under a lot at the same
Yeah.
time all of this was going on, and um, I didn't know how to deal with my own feelings. And so the way that I healed was always trying to heal everybody else. And I just kept it all inside until it started being physical for me. I started getting sick, um, really sick, and didn't
Yeah.
understand, like, where did that come from? I'm healthy. I work out, I eat right, like I'm just trying to be a mom. I don't understand why I'm so sick. And it took a lot. I kept going to the doctor, and I don't know, it's stress, you're dehydrated, or it was a virus. It was always just something. And so I never took time off. Um, I was right back at work.
Yeah.
And even so, after a robbery, um, they leave, and you still have to sit there and do inventory and fill out loss prevention paperwork and get the videos downloaded for HPD. And now you have to talk to the ADA, and you're filling out, victim impact statements, and you're going to court. And so you're never off. It is a continuous onslaught of just everything from the time that the crime happened throughout the whole process. And I'm still processing one, and we would get robbed again. And it's to the point where, like, now I'm forgetting the names of the people that robbed me, um because it just started flowing. There was just so much. And I who am I writing a statement against now? And who is this person? And trying to I mean, it was, you're talking like 50, 60 people, because every time we get robbed, it's 4 and 5 people at a time. It's never
Yeah.
just one. And it was a robbery crew.
Yeah.
um so I never took the time to heal, because it was just always so much. And so I did finally, my cousin called one, and he said, "Hey, it's Labor Day weekend, man. Like, why don't we just go down to the beach and just hang out and fish, and just the three of us, my cousin, myself, my son." And I said, "Okay, let's do that. Let's unplug. Let's go to the beach." And we did. We drove down to the coast. We stayed out all day. We had our umbrella, our sunscreen. We're fishing. We're having a good time. And I didn't look at my phone. I didn't talk to anybody. It was really a nice peace.
Right.
And then the next morning I woke up and my legs were so swollen. I was retaining fluid. You couldn't tell. I mean, the definition of cankles doesn't even explain what my legs look like. They look
Yeah.
like elephant trunks. Couldn't put socks on, couldn't put pants on. I ended up going to the emergency room in a nightgown because I couldn't even put pants or socks, and I had slippers on. And they're running all these tests and they can't figure out what's going on. And this doctor just happened to walk past my room and he sees my legs and he's like, whoa, what happened here? And he picks up my chart and he's looking through all the lab work. And he was a rheumatoid specialist who just happened to be in the ER at that time. And he said, Michelle, what did you do different yesterday? What did you eat different? What did you do different? And I said, I I took a day off. I took a day off and I relaxed and I went to the beach and we stayed outside and he was like, "You were in the sun all day." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm going to run some more tests." And so he ordered more tests. He went and talked to the ER doctor. Now they're drawing more blood and he said, I'm pretty positive you have lupus." Um, and a lot of people with lupus have to have very limited exposure to sunlight. And that's what happened. My body couldn't metabolize all the
Yeah.
vitamin D I was getting, and my kidneys started shutting down.
That's crazy. It's you say that. Same thing happened to my wife. She was
Hmm.
going through a lot of stuff. We did in a short period of time. You know, both divorces and all of that, and financial stress and this whole thing. And she's healthy as could be. And one day she went and hung out by the pool with her mom, and just broke out everywhere in hive, and that's what started it. And we've been going down this road like you, same thing for a while now, trying to figure it all out. But
Yeah.
man,
And it affects people so differently. Some people it can cause heart disease, some people arthritis, some people, it's systematic. Um, Mine manifested with my kidneys and my immune system to where I have arthritis in every single one of my joints. Every single one. Any part of your body that bends, I have arthritis. My x-rays, I look like an old person. Um, and my kidneys weren't working. And once we got the diagnosis, then we're trying to figure out the cause. Well, it's an immune disorder. Your body attacks itself, and my body was attacking itself due to stress. Stress and trauma and trauma, stress and PTSD. Um, my body decided that the world was very dangerous, and including myself. And so it kept trying to attack everything to protect me, and I was just getting more and more sick. And I was going to therapy, trying to deal with the mental side of it and realizing that the mental side of it now affects the physical side of it. And I started researching the physical pain that comes from PTSD. It's not just in your head that you can dismiss and I can do therapy and I'll be fine. You never recover. You get better. You learn to live with it. You learn to deal with it. But now I have a whole nother burden. I have to deal with my physical being as well.
yeah,
Um, I didn't want to lose my life, and my son was so young. So I had to make a lot of changes, and one of those changes was to leave my job,
right,
which I finally did. And people ask me, well, why did you stay? And I stayed for my kids. Man, my reps, they needed me. These are my babies. And, I was their mom,
yeah,
and I stayed to protect them because I felt like that was my duty, over protecting myself.
right,
And over the years, I finally realized that I cannot pour from an empty cup. And I have to protect myself as well before I can help anybody else. And so I did. I left that job. And I started doing a lot of research and going to different, um, table talks and forums, and started learning not only about the criminal justice system, but about how trauma affects people physically and mentally. Um, I read a lot. I research a lot. I've always been very analytical as a person. I analyze things 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And I always, I like to have control over the end game, right? Like, well, if we do it this way, it'll end up this way. But
Yeah.
if this changes, then it ends up, I'm always looking forward. And so as I'm going through all these trials and court hearings, and I'm talking with HPD, and one of the robberies, one of the last ones we had, it was a pretty bad one, and HPD seemed to take a really long time to get there, and I was getting angry, and I kept calling back, and I'm like, "Are they coming?" Yes, 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 they're coming. What I didn't know is that we have trackers in our safe. We have GPS trackers, and my store was such a high crime location that I had multiple trackers, and they were already chasing these guys.
Yeah.
Um, because these trackers, as soon as they move a centimeter, it automatically alerts the tracking company, and they watch it. If it just stays right there in the safe, yes, we know maybe we knocked it over, do an inventory. But if it moves, they dispatch. And so they were already chasing these guys. They got them, they caught them, and then they said they came to the store and they said, "We're sorry we didn't come here first, but we were tracking them and we did catch them. Now we're going to bring them back and we're going to start this whole thing." And I was didn't realize that one, it was actually witnessed by an officer that was on the armed robbery task force. So armed robberies at the time were such a problem in the Heights that they had a task force following these robbery crews. And one of the guys, he was also on the SWAT team, was on this task force, was on his way to work. So he's full gear, in his own truck. And he was sitting at the light in front of my store, and he turned and he looked and he saw them. AR-15, pistols, they're holding the door open. And so he called it into his team. And so at the same time that the tracking company was tracking the trackers, the robbery task force in personal vehicles were behind this guy. And
Yeah.
then officer, there was nothing going on that Sunday in the Heights because everybody from HPD was there.
Right. Right.
And they came and talked to me, and they started telling me about this organized crime ring that they're following, these robbery crews, and they had robbed another store the night before. And he said it's just getting so frustrating because, we picked up these guys, 2 weeks ago, and one of them was wearing an ankle monitor from a previous armed robbery. And he's like, we're just getting frustrated because we're just picking up the same guys, picking up the same guys. And I, I didn't understand that. The
Yeah.
only thing I knew about the criminal justice system was what I learned growing up and what you see on TV. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't involved in going to jail and getting out, and I had no idea. I know you watch Law and Order, and that's what happens.
Right.
That's what I knew. And so I started really questioning, like, well, why is this happening? And at the time, I was very angry with our district attorney's office because I thought that they just weren't bringing charges. They weren't keeping these people in jail. They're letting them off, was my assumption, without knowing what was really going on. And what had just happened in Harris County was the county had entered into the O'Donnell consent decree, which is what they called bail reform at the time. This consent decree, uh, anybody charged with a misdemeanor does not pay a single penny to get out of jail. They sign a piece of paper with the pinky promise and off they go. So I started researching bail, and I started researching crime and the effects of crime and the effects of this bail reform. And I finally swallowed my pride and I said, I really need to talk to everybody involved in the criminal justice system, including the district attorney. Um, and she agreed. Let's talk about it. I sat down with the ADA and I talked to her for a long time. And one of my customers at the time, I didn't realize, was a bail bondsman. Um, and so he said, "Well, what do you know about bail?" And I said, you go to jail, they tell you how much your bail is, your family has to go to a bondsman, they pay their fee, you get out of jail and you have to go to court. And he said, okay, let me break it down for you a little bit more. And I sat there with him for hours. And he told me the history of bail, what it's for, why it's in our Constitution, why it's necessary. And then he explained to me what happened with the O'Donnell consent decree. So then I go and I download the consent decree and I read it and I'm like, sounds good in theory. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the majority of domestic violence charges are misdemeanors.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. That's crazy. I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Mhm. And while it's considered a low level crime because they slapped you versus choking you, it's still violence. And even stalking to me is considered violent. You're afraid to leave your house.
Right.
Um, you are oppressed. And I didn't understand why people could get out of jail. You know, typically I knew if you went to jail for domestic violence or you go to jail because you're drunk, they hold you for a certain period of time, your cool down period, right? Like you have to stay in jail for 24 to 48 hours. And then you have your hearing. And then the judge tells you, like, hey, you probably shouldn't be beating people up.
Right.
Go ahead and give you some terms you need to follow, take anger management. In the meantime, the victim has time to regroup, find a place to stay, change the locks, pack up whatever they need to do. And that wasn't happening because now they're getting out of jail 6 to 7 hours later and they're going right back to their victim because now they're pissed off. They've been to
Yeah.
jail, got arrested. They go home, they beat them up again. And why'd you call the cops? Next time I'll kill you. And then victims are recanting. They're not in a safe place. And then what happens? Somebody died. This man was abusive to his wife. And her mom is a part of our group. And she finally called the cops. She came home one day. He had murdered her cat, said, you're next. Um, Beat her up. She called the cops. He goes to jail. Um, her mom's trying to get a hold of her, finally does. And she said, no, I'm fine. He's in jail. I'll be okay. Come to my house. No, it's okay. He finally, I did it. I finally called the cops. I did it. He went to jail. And they let him out on a PR bond just a few hours later, and he went home and he killed her. And she was
Wow.
pregnant. She was,
Wow.
and so now she and her baby lost their life, and a family lost their daughter and grandchild, because Harris County doesn't think that misdemeanors should have to pay to get out of jail, or that domestic violence is nonviolent. Um, and it's not, it's escalating. We've seen an uptick in murder suicides, from intimate partner violence in Harris County. And it's because there's no accountability for it. And so my mindset, I have to fix that because at this time now I've been in therapy for a couple of years. I'm, going through my treatments. I'm starting to feel a little bit better, but it became my passion to make sure that nobody else had to go through anything that I've been through.
Yeah.
I've had a lifetime of violence as an adult. I mean, starting as a teenager all the way to now where I'm 47, my life has just been filled with violence, and it shouldn't be that way. And I said, how do I help? And I spoke with Andy Kahn, who's the director for crime victim services at Crime Stoppers. And I let him know that, years ago, when I was just a child at 13 and a friend was killed, he was dealing with victim services well before Crime Stoppers with the city. And it was the first time, it's going to sound bad, but it was the first time a white man gave a shit about little Latina kids in the neighborhood. And it stuck with me. And I
Yeah.
never talked to him again until, it was at 6 years ago. And I started telling him, I remember you, for when my friend was murdered. And I never mentioned a name. I just said, it was a situation. It was a drive-by. It was the wrong house. And, we were just little kids. And he said, I know exactly who you're talking about. Her name. And I said, holy shit, it's been 30 something years.
Yeah.
This dude remembered her name. And I said, oh my God, Like you do so much for victims and so much for the community. I want to do that. Um, so I started going to anywhere that he was going and listening and watching and um, talking to defense attorneys, to judges, to inmates, to ADAs, and then our district attorney, Kim Ogg, and other victims. And with Crime Stoppers, meeting a lot of these victims, there's an association called Parents of Murdered Children, and they have meetings at Crime Stoppers once a month. And it is a room full of people that have lost their kids to homicide. And I started meeting some of these people, and we started running into each other at different events, and we started becoming friends and going to court with each other. And just if you need a phone call in the middle of the night, somebody to talk to, it's we were drawn together by our trauma. All had different situations, but we all had one thing in common, and that was trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so we started trying to figure out how we could do it all as a group. And Kim Ogg reached out to a few of us, and she was leaving office. Um, her primary, she was sacrificed for sticking up for us, that's for sure. And she said, I really admire you guys. You guys are all so smart and so strong, and you've really put your neck out there. And I think that you would do a lot more if you organize together. That's something you guys should probably do. And that's what we decided to do. And we became Texas Crime Victims United.
There you
Um,
go.
so that's how we all got here. We all
That's
have
awesome.
a different path. I haven't lost a child. I was the victim myself. I am a surviving victim, but pretty much everybody else in the organization has lost a family member to homicide.
And
And so
and
we have,
that's just in Houston. I mean, and now you Austin and Dallas and Fort Worth and San
there,
Antonio and
Eagle,
Amarillo and then outside of the other states, it's like, man, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm not a fan of the media anyway, but
mm-mm.
I I think it's purposeful that they don't put those kind of stats out there. They don't want the
Found
world to
the
see that it's as bad as
data.
it is.
Yes, they have
You know.
manipulated data. So what they didn't realize with the O'Donnell consent decree, it inadvertently ended up in felony courts. So the purpose of it was for misdemeanors. It bled over into felony courts, and judges then began saying, my hands are tied. I have to let these people out of jail on a PR bond, or I have to give them a low bail amount because the jail's full and it's really oppressive, and we're just putting Black and brown people in jail for no reason. And I'm like, what do you mean, no reason? They're hurting people. And these are repeat, habitual career criminals.
Yeah.
And so I started tracking PR bonds in felony court, which is where it wasn't even supposed to be. And Andy had already discovered at the same time that I discovered it that felons in possession of a weapon were getting out of jail for free on a PR bond. You're
Wow.
talking about somebody who's already been convicted of a violent felony, who is now in the community with a gun they're not supposed to have, and they
Wow.
don't have any accountability. They can just get out of jail for free. And where do you think they got that gun? They stole it from somebody. So then they go and they steal another one, and then they're back in business. These people don't have jobs. Their job is crime.
Yeah. You're the first person, you see all this on the news, and I knew all this was going on, and they always talk about it, how, like, in New York, they guys go to jail and they're right back out on the street, but you're the first person I've talked to, like, personally, that, like, explained it. Like, this is why it's happening, and it's mind numbing, infuriating, and you're like,
Chaotic.
yeah, I mean, and I don't know. I always think to myself, when it comes to stuff like this, I don't know if I'd call myself a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe a lot of this is done by design,
Mhm.
and
It is.
it's designed to, I don't know, keep us in a space And hey, you worry about you got this is what you got to worry about. That way, you're not paying attention to what's really going on here. I don't know, but it's I feel like we're a part of a game and that they're
It's
playing.
we started, a lot of us were doing a lot of work on our own, and then we started collaborating together. And I've reached out and spoken to people in other various counties as well. So, TCVU, our organization, while we've started here in Harris County, we are named Texas Crime Victims United for a reason because we will branch out for the whole state. We'd like to have organizations in every um, part of Texas. There are victims everywhere and eventually national. But our point is to become an organization until we don't have to be one
Yeah,
anymore because we have fixed the issues that are causing these things to happen. So we're trying to put ourselves out of work. It's not a business. We don't get paid. We're volunteers, but we're
right.
trying to put ourselves out
Yeah,
of our organization completely. And so we started looking at what's the biggest way to attack it. And it became changing laws. The judges are saying their hands are tied. Okay, let's untie them.
yeah,
Uh, let's pass true bail reform legislation. And so, the last session 2 years ago, it was not very successful. There was a lot of opposition. There's a lot of social justice groups, and we're fighting organizations like the ACLU, who believes that everybody is oppressed and everything has to do with race and wealth, and it doesn't have anything to do with personal responsibility. And so then I started tracking numbers. I don't ever want to get asked a question I don't have an answer to.
yeah,
I don't want anybody to ever tell me that I'm wrong. And so I go by data and I don't say something until I know that this is it. And so as our current district attorney was running his campaign and he said there's too many black and brown people in jail, and we have to, give them job training instead of probation. We have to let them be successful. And I understand that that is a great pipe dream. And I understand that, and we all believe that people do deserve a second chance. Just because you've made a mistake one time doesn't mean that you're going to continue to make mistakes. We've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But when you continue to make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, you're no longer getting another chance. There's a second chance, but there's not a fifth chance, there's not a 13th chance. And so I started tracking the numbers. And as he says, the majority of our jail population are, black and brown people. And so I started tracking the demographics of crime victims. And I pulled the data from our medical examiner's office on every homicide that year, and 85% of them were minorities. So then I started tracking national demographic for crime victims, and it's over 80% of crime victims nationwide are minorities. And violent crime is a crime of opportunity. Um, this is not, they like to talk about bail as being a question of wealth, but whether you like it or not, wealthy people are not committing these crimes. Wealth shouldn't be anything that you're talking about when it comes to bail. It needs to be the risk, um, for the community. I don't want to talk about wealth. Because again, wealthy people aren't committing these crimes. And if they did, they're just going to pay cash anyway. They're not going to do bail. They're not going to get a bond. And so I started tracking that data and said, if you let somebody out of jail for free, again, they're not wealthy. They go back to their community. And who do they victimize next? Their neighbor, Bessie, who's 90 years old. She's retired. She's vulnerable. And so then they rob her house. And then they're robbing people down the street. And they're just making more and more victims. And we're having offenders. There was one just the other day that said it and said, I don't care. Just going to go to jail. I'll be out on a PR bond. I'll be back tomorrow. I have a lot of friends in Precinct 4, which is up here in the north side of Houston, and we border Montgomery County, which is a million times more conservative than the Harris County criminal justice
yeah,
system. And criminals know this. And so I'll have my precinct 4 deputies chasing somebody. They end up in Shenandoah, or they end up in Conroe, and they finally get stopped and arrested. And they said, "Wait, am I still in Harris County?" I'm like, "Nah, you're in Montgomery County now." They're like, "Damn."
yeah. Yeah.
Say, County, yeah, you're still in Harris County. Oh, fuck yeah, they know they're going to be home in time for dinner,
Right.
but they get caught outside,
Ah, man, that is insane. It's
and
insane.
they're
Wow.
vocal about it.
Yeah, and they know that they've gotten to where they understand. Hey, let's just do this shit in
Do
Harris
it
County.
because we get away with it.
All
We have
good.
politicians excusing it,
Right.
saying we have very rich people who do not live our lives. They don't live in neighborhoods where there's crime. They live in gated communities. And these rich people want to sleep better at night, saying that they're helping poor people, but they're
Right.
helping wrong poor people. And so the conversation always comes around, these offenders. And they said this when we went and testified this last session. One of the groups up there was talking about, well, we don't want people languishing in jail because they can't afford bail, because then how do they support their family? They're still innocent until they're proven guilty, but if they're stuck in jail, they can't work and they can't support their kids. And I just sat there like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Like,
what work are
I'm
they doing?
I'm not, I was at work. I had a job. They
Yeah.
didn't have a job. They weren't
Yeah.
working. They
Yeah.
came here because they didn't want to get a job.
Yeah.
I saw trials where they confessed to just being greedy. I just wanted money.
Yeah.
I wanted to sell this stuff and get money to buy shoes and jewelry and clothes and party. If they could have gotten a job to do that, but they weren't. They wanted the easy way out because they know there's no accountability. And I said, but I'm poor and minority, and and I was at my job when I became a victim of violent crime, and then I have to go back to that same place. I still
Yeah.
had to work. And so it really starts making you think like, well, what's the point of being a law-abiding citizen
Right.
when everything is turned for the offenders and there's no resources for the victims? And that's why we organized, because there's a big lapse in things for victims. There's a lot of resources for felons, there's a lot of resources for the defendants pretrial. When I had to go to court, every single time I had to testify, I had to take a day off of work. I had to drive downtown, pay to park. It's no less than $20 to park, right? A lot of times it's 30, 40, depending on what
Right.
day of the week or how close you could park.
Right.
Go through security, go sit up there, look at these people face to face again, just to have a hearing reset, go back to your car, go home. Then they reset it. Then you just do this over and over and over. And there's, 20, 30 settings for one trial, and we're talking 4 and 5 people per robbery. So I'm living at the courthouse, and it is costing me money twice a week to go downtown and take time off. So now I'm having to pay to go to trial, and I was the victim. And
Yeah.
I sat there, and one of them that bothered me the most, I was sitting there, and it's myself, two of my reps, and the ADA on the left side. And on the right side, we have the defendant's entire family, his preacher, the principal from the school. Everybody's wearing new clothes. They were brought to court. They didn't have to pay for parking. He had 3 attorneys. Like, all of this was paid for by us, the taxpayers in Harris County. And so not only did I have to pay to come to court to testify as a victim, I paid for my own defendant to have lawyers and nice clothes, and nobody had to park, and they had childcare, and they were brought in and they were treated like royalty, and we're sitting there by ourselves because we don't have an attorney. The
Yeah.
80, they work for the state. They represent the state for us, but they don't work for us. And
Yeah.
so their job is to get justice for the victim and the defendant, because there are going to be situations where somebody is charged that is innocent, and so
Right.
they protect justice on both sides. So they're not there just for us. They're there to, for the state to protect the justice for the victim and the defendant, but they had attorneys that were there just for them. And I asked the question, I said, well, can I get an attorney? And they said, yeah, you can pay for one,
Wow.
but you don't get a court appointed attorney that represents rights unless you're a defendant. And I said, well, what the fuck? Like that's backwards. So yes, the ADA is there to represent your interest, but their interests are also for justice overall. So whether the
Well,
defendant is guilty or innocent.
it's almost like you're you're being you. It's a constant process of being victimized.
Mm-hmm.
Like
We're being
you get
recognized by
victimized by getting robbed, and then you're getting money taken from you. You're getting your tax money taken from you, and gas
and
money, and I mean, it's like a nonstop process of being taken advantage of from the just because somebody decided to rob you.
mm-hmm.
Man, this I swear, these are the things that make me so angry.
It made me very angry. We were victims are the only part of the criminal justice system. We are the only part that we didn't ask to be here. Lawyers went to law school. They chose to be a defense attorney. They chose to be a prosecutor. The judges, the same thing. Like they chose to run for that seat. They're attorneys, and the defendants chose to commit a crime. I I went to work. I
Yeah,
didn't choose to become a crime victim. I shouldn't leave my house and wonder, is it going to happen again? I shouldn't have to just kiss my child so much because I don't know if today is the day that I don't
right,
come home from work and
yeah,
I'm working freaking retail. I'm
right,
not a first responder where I leave my house knowing, like you guys,
yeah,
this might be my last shift because something's going to happen and I'm going to have to give my life to save a life. I was
yeah,
a manager of a cell phone store.
yeah,
Make that choice. And I will just, the in my head I hear this one girl that she told me, she said, I'm joining the military. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, if I'm going to die for something, it's going to be for my country, not for iPhones.
yeah.
And I said,
Sad.
oh.
It's sad. I mean, it's sad but true thought. So you don't, my wife. You heard my wife and my daughter's story, what they went through. The other part you don't know, and she's gonna want to talk with you more now. But prior to this, her and a friend of hers are like, I call them bona fide pedophile hunters. That's what they are. And it was because of something not that happened to her directly, but in her life and somebody she was involved with for a long time in the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and she was victimized by the church, meaning mentally. They were always convincing her, no, it's not what you think, and stay with this person, and it the whole process. Well, she, like you, had enough. I'm gonna do something. And she's you and her, y'all remind me of each other because she's that way, like, you know so she started down that path. And when I tell people, I'm like, y'all don't understand, when like the Texas Rangers Police Organization, you're just a person and they ask you to come to Waco to talk to them about what you're doing, like, because you're making waves, like, that's the person she is. But it's so frustrating to watch on that end, because everything you're talking about, this one person, right? It's like you got people coming out finally and saying, this happened to me numerous times in my life and it destroyed my life. And then you watch the justice system go to work, and there's these people committing these crimes and doing these things to young children. And in no time flat, they're back out and they're working jobs, making six figures, and living their life like nothing ever happened. And then you go to talk to the attorneys and the judges and all that, and they're like, you know, sorry, it's all you get. And and then you realize, you're like, man, and then you understand why people, like victims like that, don't want to come out, because they know, it's like, what's the point? I'm gonna go through this and bring that old pain back up again, and all I'm gonna do is get slapped in the face, and nothing's gonna come of it.
That happened on a grand scale here in Houston, starting a couple of years ago. So um, they kept telling us, you know, crime is down. Crime is trending down. The only thing right now increasing is property crime. But crime is down. And then, of course, I'm at a lot of these scenes, and I have a lot of friends in law enforcement and the fire department, and I'm hearing these stories from them. People are no longer reporting crime. They were just like, it's not even worth it. Like, yeah, I know they broke into my car. I'd rather just fix the window. It's whatever, because you're going to sit there for hours. They're so busy. We're understaffed, in
Yeah.
all of the departments. They're so busy dealing with priority calls. It's going to
Yeah.
take them a while to come out and respond to a property crime. But you don't realize that property crime, they then stole a gun from your car. Which don't ever leave your gun in a car, but it
Yep.
happens all the time. Or from a house, they burglar, and then they use that gun and they commit a violent crime. And it's just a string of a reaction that goes on because something wasn't responded to and because somebody says, I'm not going to report. And, it's just not worth the hassle. I'd rather just pay to get my window fixed and move on about my day. And that's happening with violent crime. Someone will get jumped and robbed and they're just like, whatever, my fault. I was outside. Like now they're victim blaming, like, well, I shouldn't have been out at night. No, we should be able to go walk to the mailbox, or we should be
Yeah.
able to HEB whenever we want. We shouldn't be like, oh, my fault that I went to Walmart at night because I needed diapers and then end up getting robbed at gunpoint. But people feel that way. And then when we talk about immigration, immigration has not been fixed. And the majority of us that are legal immigrants here, we don't want illegal immigration either. And what these people that are wanting the open borders, and they're just like, oh, it's fine, we don't need to, they're just here to work. What they don't realize is that the immigrant community is a target for violent crime, because they won't report. They don't want to report crime because they think they're going to get deported, for calling the cops. And they were just robbed. I witnessed an old man get beat up at a gas station by a bunch of juveniles. He refused to. Oh, can you hear me still? It says it's disconnected.
No, it just for a second it did. I lost you, but it's okay. Yeah.
There we go. He was at a gas station. A bunch of juveniles were asking him to buy beer and cigarettes, and he refused. He was just an older man on his way home from work, and he's like, "No, I'm not." And they beat him up, and I caught it on my dash cam because I was getting gas, and
Wow.
I have cameras in my car because I'm paranoid as hell. And so I watched it. I'm armed, right? So I jump out, I run over, and I'm like, "Hey, the kids run off to an apartment complex behind the gas station." And I told him, I was like, "Hey." They ran to this apartment complex. I have it all on video. It's in 4K, man. I'm going to take this video over there. The leasing office will identify who these kids are. And he's like, no, 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 no. I don't have my papers. I don't have my papers. And I'm like, okay. You don't have to have your papers to report a crime. Like, you're a victim. They can get you a visa to stay here while you go through the court process. Like, they're not going to deport you when you're a victim of crime.
Yeah.
And they won't report. They will not report. They just absolutely refuse because they're so afraid. And so they're targeted. They
Yep.
are targeted. And these are, again, our poor minority people that
Yeah.
are being targeted by violent criminals because they know they're not going to report. So that's how they're trending. Crime is down. And then we discovered that HPD had suspended 250,000 cases, um, personnel, issues. They didn't have enough personnel to investigate crimes. And so they were using this code to just file
Yeah.
away. Like, you file a report, they just file away. We don't have enough staff for this. We don't have enough staff for this. And so they discovered this. And you want to piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. You said crime is down, but 250,000 cases were never even investigated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just misdemeanor, little trespass or mischief.
Yeah.
There was sexual assaults.
Yeah.
There was a homicide. There was a lot of violent crime that was never even investigated. And I know they'd come up with, like, even now they're discovering that DNA from one scene was on multiple scenes, for violence. And these people are just running around committing more and more crime. And our departments are already understaffed. So if you've been arrested 15 times in 3 months, and you've committed a lot of crime, because we don't have a lot of cops. So if they've caught you that many times, what did they not catch you doing?
Yeah.
And so they're very emboldened to continue to commit crime because there's no responsibility.
Right.
Um, and that's what we decided to change. And so we started, um, pushing for legislation that would keep the community safe and untie the hands of the judges who just weren't doing it. And I listened to even Mitch Little was saying, yes, the judges have the ability to deny bail in certain cases, but they're just not doing it. So now we're going to make it so where they have to do it.
So, I know y'all got recognized at this event we were at in Houston. Um, what was the award that y'all got? I was trying to remember what it was y'all got there.
The Courage Award.
Courage
Um,
Award.
the Harris County Republican Party did give us the Courage Award to our organization for Texas Crime Victims United. And then they gave one to Andy Kahn and Randy Wallace for their Breaking Bond series that has brought a lot of this to the public. It is an ongoing series. It's insane that it is an ongoing series, but it's every day you could pull just a random court document and it could end up on Breaking Bond. That's just how backwards it is in Harris County. And so we were given this Courage Award because, again, we are all victims. We're all grieving. We're all just surviving. And we decided to organize and fight for the community when politicians were not. And it was the first time in 6 years that I've ever came out and one, publicly said my full name, and two, testified for bail reform. And it took me days to even mentally prepare myself to have to sit in this room and testify in front of all these state reps. And I know they were not all friendly, and they
Yeah.
weren't, and have to pour out my trauma and
Yeah.
speak publicly, and everybody's watching. I mean, it's streaming everywhere. Everybody's interested in what's going on, and there's my whole name, right? So I start getting messages and people talking shit, people saying congratulations. It was, a mixture of everything, and people just even saying like, I never knew. You always seem like the happiest person in the room. And I'm definitely one of the saddest people in the room, but I hide behind a smile.
Yeah.
Um, we all do. And it took a lot of courage for all of us. I can't imagine. I sit there listening to my friends testify about losing their children to homicide, and my heart is broken. I had to go out and speak about my own trauma. I don't know that I would be able to speak about anything that happened to my child. I They have so much courage to do.
Yeah. I always say that. I'm like, and I have these talks with people all the time, or I'll do my lives, and we discuss things like this, and inevitably the discussion of, people are always on there and they're like, well, I know you say you got to go live an exemplary life and all this stuff, but what about if it's your child? And I honestly, I'm like, I can't give you an answer I because I'm honest with you, I don't know. Like I said, I saw enough death in children in my time that's what messed me up and caused me
Mhm.
to go down this path in the first place. And I can't sit here and say that I would be okay if something happened to my kid. I don't know,
I wouldn't.
and I'm pretty sure it would absolutely sink me. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you, some of those people that are in your group, that exactly they've done that, and I see them, and man, and you're like, gosh dang, how are you even here? How are you here talking about this and have a smile on your face? And you know, I tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, you want to see something happen to you? You want to see somebody go scorched earth?
Yeah.
You'll end up seeing you'll see my face on the screen somewhere for a
Mm-hmm.
reason. Right?
And I'm gonna be on the news like this.
Yeah, like,
I
mm-hmm.
did. I did.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was, I mean, yes. I wouldn't be able to. I mean, I respect them so much, and they definitely had the courage to talk about what happened to their kids. And I know, I have friends that have found their family members' bodies. Um, I I don't know, as much as I've been through, I don't know that I would recover from something like that. And they don't recover.
yeah.
Ever. And I know that I wouldn't either, but I wouldn't be them having the courage to stand there and speak about it. And they did. We all did. We sat there. We outlasted the opposition. There were all these other social justice groups, these abolished prison people. The ACLU was there, and they're talking about how oppressive it is for people to go to jail and all this. And we're sitting there, and you can't leave the room. Like, they call your name, you don't get to testify, and we don't know when they're going to call the bill we're testifying on. We're there for 13 hours. You can't leave, so we're talking, we're not eating. We have a bottle of water. We were like taking turns running to the bathroom and go out into the hallway to like take a drink of water. And then Lacey Hull's office gave us a bag full of snacks. And so it's like that, otherwise we wouldn't have eaten anything that day. So now we've got free snacks, and we've got some beef jerky, and we're passing a little packet of snacks along. We have to go out in the hallway and then run back in there. And sure enough, I go out and I'm like trying to stuff a fruit snack in my mouth, and they're calling my name. So then I have to run back in there.
Right.
Dizzy, I'm hot. I've been sitting on my butt for hours in these little chairs. And then
To
it
so yeah, so did this? So what you were doing there, that what you were testifying for, has it come to fruition? Did it?
most of it.
Okay.
Most of it. There were two that didn't pass, that I think are going to end up in special session. Um, the one that was,
What was the one that passed?
so we had a couple, they quite a few actually, and so we're dealing with how judges set bail, how magistrates set bail, um, and then so it was SB 5, and I am so bad with numbers.
I'm with you.
But so that repeat violent offenders are not given PR bonds, and adding things like felon in possession of a weapon as a charge that you can't get a PR bond for. And then adding different crimes to the one that didn't pass, that was the most important to me personally, was SJR 87. Would have been a constitutional amendment, and we're going to try to get it passed in special session. But this was one that was um, brought for Jocelyn Nungare. And in this SJR, if you are here illegally and you are charged with a violent crime, then you are to be held without bail.
Yeah.
And we were 3 votes short.
Yeah. Wow. Three votes.
Three.
And that kind of stuff to me, even that, it's like what three people hear that and they're like, no.
It was all the Democrats in the county voted no on SJR 87. They see this every day and act like it's not happening. They act like the news or us, that we're just making it bigger than it really is. And it's not. That we are honest with the data. Like, it's every day I'm posting it. What do you mean it's not happening? What do you mean it's not happening? It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. And like, oh, you're just making it bigger than it is. No, it's not. Even one victim is too much.
Yeah.
And, um, so why they would choose it, and then so they're having this argument about like, well, illegals have the same rights. I said, okay, cool, but when you're setting bail, one of the biggest reasons you consider for bail is flight risk,
Yeah.
right? To the community, a flight risk, and their resources. And so when you're here, they're not from here. How is that not the definition of flight risk when they have zero ties to this state? They will just go back. And had this been an amendment back when my friend was killed when she, we were 12 and 13 years old.
Yeah.
Her family would have gotten justice. So her offenders, and her name is Jennifer Moroz. Jennifer's killers were 16 years old, both of them. One of them was an illegal from Colombia. The other one was a resident alien from Ecuador. And they were given bail. They got out of jail. And the illegal from Colombia left back to his country. And I have found him on social media, living the life in his home country, free and clear. I mean, of course, he can't come here. He'd have go to jail for murder, but he's not gonna come here, and we're not gonna go get him. It's expensive, right? And then the resident alien was sentenced. He did stay. He went to court. He was sentenced to 70 years TDC, and after I think it was 6 or 7 years, he was released from TDC and deported back to Ecuador. No parole. He didn't have to serve the rest of his time. He didn't have any punishment other than a few years here in Texas, and then he was just deported. Um, that's wrong.
Yes.
Her family was like, we finally, at least
Yeah.
somebody doing time for it, and then they're gone. And so at 21, 22 years old, he's back in his country starting his life all over. Jennifer's life ended at 12 years old.
Yeah.
Jocelyn's life ended at 12 years old.
Yeah.
Arlene Alvarez, her life ended at 9 years old. Um, I haven't even accomplished things I want to accomplish in my adult life in 9,
Yeah.
10 years. They never even had a chance to start, but their killers were able to start over. And it's wrong. I don't want to argue the semantics of having the same rights as citizens. You are an absolute flight risk. And you have committed a very violent crime. Now, we're not talking about illegals that are arrested for misdemeanor criminal mischief and things like this. There
Yeah.
is a set very violent, the worst of the worst crimes that they should be held in jail without bail. I started researching right now. We have just over 1,000 inmates in Harris County that are illegal and that have ICE holds. And I started tracking how many of these are charged with murder. And I haven't, I've gotten to 30, and I'm only on page 3 of 17 pages of court documents to go
And
through.
30 of them are in jail for murder. And when you say ice hold, what does that mean?
They have an immigration detainer, so they are here illegally being charged with a crime. So even if they were to bail out, they would then be picked up, hopefully, by immigration. That's a lot. That's a lot of processing, and there's been times that people have gotten out with detainers before ICE ever picked them up. And then I saw a guy in there the other day as I was researching. He's had multiple detainers, and these holds are lifted. It's like he gets released, the hold's lifted. Um, and if they would have deported him, this girl would still be alive. And this dude in particular had committed multiple violent crimes here in Harris County. He was on video with this girl. Um, he was identified by a witness in the video of who he was, and they had a warrant out for him. He fled to Mexico. Um, he was accused of sexual assault against a teenager in Mexico. And then another victim here in Harris County, an ex-girlfriend of his came forward saying that he violently sexually assaulted her as well, held her at gunpoint. And so he Mexican officials, the crime investigations unit in Mexico, did pick him up. He's not back in custody here in the U.S. yet, but he'd had, I think it was 3 INS detainers before that he had been released on. And Harris County just recently, last month or last week, dismissed the murder charges against him for insufficient evidence. Even
It's
on video, and he was identified, and he was bragging on social media while he was in Mexico about them looking for him, and oh, I didn't do nothing, they're not going to find me, blah blah blah. So he's taunting officials on social media. and our current district attorney decided that it wasn't enough to go to trial, um, and dismiss the murder charges. The sexual assault charges are still pending, but the murder charge has been dismissed. And so, had he been in jail with a detainer, even if the charges were dismissed, then immigration could then deport him.
And
These things aren't happening.
I would like to see the numbers on how many times that plays out on every state in the U.S. because
Very
it's a lot.
I noticed that a lot of times in these, they have to self-report, and then you have to verify your identity to figure out if you're a citizen or not. But I see people sitting in there for a year or two, and it still says citizenship status unknown. And so now, if you're trying to run data and just try to run a whole batch and just only take out the ones where it says citizen no, you're going to miss all the ones that say unknown and not know if. And so we have a manipulation of the data nationwide, where minorities are being reported as white offenders. They're not being reported as illegals, or non-citizens, or even resident aliens. And so they're manipulating this data. So it's very frustrating to have to sit here and manually do it case by case by case by case, cross reference to immigration, cross reference to ICE, have to go through what documents did they provide? Have they ever been picked up before? And that's just in Harris County, because not all counties report as transparently as Harris County does. The only good thing that came out of the O'Donnell consent decree is the fact that they had to be completely transparent with what was going on in our jail and our courts. And so we have access now to more documents than we've ever had before, and it's being tracked. But the data is still being manipulated. And so to try to actually get an accurate number nationwide, not only would it be astounding, but it's going to be impossible because it's
Yeah.
being hidden. And so until we bring things to light and make a big deal out of cases like Jennifer Moroz, like Jocelyn Ungare, these things are going to stay under the radar because it's not being reported correctly. And that's pretty gross manipulation of crime data.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'll be honest. I wasn't expecting this. Like when we started talking about your story and how deep it goes, but
This is all
man,
fell into accidentally because, again, like, I'm not one to just take somebody's word when they tell you something and
yeah,
say, Bondsman is telling me all this stuff. It sounds like fiction, that he's telling me, and I'm like, okay, buddy, I'm gonna go read it. And so then I do, and I'm reading it, and at this point, it's like I don't understand what some of this is because I'm not a lawyer. So what do? I go ask lawyers. What does this mean? Explain this to me. Where? How did we get to this? Like, who would? And discovering so much, that really gave me the drive to continue to do what I do. It is a huge part of my healing journey is educating the public. If I could save just one person from being a victim of any violent crime or any crime altogether, then the last 6 years of my life have been completely worth it. All of the pain, all of the personal attacks, all of the trauma, all of it is worth it if just one person doesn't become a victim because of the work that all of us have put into this.
yeah,
And so that is how I have taken my healing journey, learning to ask for help and then diverting my trauma into advocating. It kept me busy. It kept my mind off of it, and having to then tell my story over and over and over was very therapeutic because I felt like in my mind, like, this doesn't feel like real life. There's no way these kinds of things are happening. And then I tell my story and it matches somebody else's story and somebody else's story and somebody else. And now we're talking like, oh shit, that happened to you. Well, where did you go? And it happened to me. And then now it's like we come from and we're from all different backgrounds. We're from all different racial groups, demographics, wealth, poor. I mean, so different. But the one thing we had in common was that trauma. And we're able to help each other, and all of us find it very therapeutic to try to make a change. We're not in it for fortune. None of us get paid to do this. As a matter of fact, all of us
Yeah.
have put so much of our own resources into our advocacy work. Um, Paying for the website, getting insurance. All of us have paid to go to court. We, like, hey, you have trial next Thursday. I'm there, man. And we
Yeah.
all go. We pay for parking. We're buying books for each other. You have to, some of these court documents that are these huge packets, you have to pay for, so I'm paying over $10,000 to download court documents from all these different counties, and trying to learn, and paying for subscriptions to be able to look up criminal histories, and having it's just a constant drain on all of our resources. We're not here for fortune. We're not
Yeah.
making money off of this. We're not here for any kind of recognition. Nobody wants to be recognized as a victim.
Right.
Like, this isn't what I want to be known for. I sure would like to be known for my talent as a shit talker, I guess, but people want to be comedians, or they want to be teachers, or they want to be lawyers, or they want to be. I didn't grow
Yeah.
up, and you know what? I'm going to be a victim. That's
Yeah.
going to be my career.
Yeah.
And it sucks because that's what it's become, because it's not something, it doesn't go away. You can't just be like, I'm a victim today and not tomorrow. I could work in retail today and work in gas and oil tomorrow. That's different.
Yeah.
You don't get to make these choices. And so I had to turn my pain, because it wasn't just affecting me, it's affecting my family. Um, how hard it is to have to tell my young child, hey, do me a favor, man, don't run up behind mommy like that. Like, this quickness from behind me, man, that freaks me out. He's wanting to jump on my back and play, and I'm just immediately shut down. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm getting grabbed again. And going out to eat, and I have to sit with my back to the wall. I've got to see the door. I want to see everybody's hands. I don't go to concerts. I rarely go to anything where there's a large group of people, like that dinner. Anxiety sky high. And so I spent days preparing to accept this award, and then I spent days in bed trying to
Recovering.
recover.
Yeah, man. Wow.
It didn't go away, but it's necessary. And the only people that they're going to listen to, unfortunately, are going to be us.
Yeah.
And um, the advocacy has definitely been a huge healing part.
So tell people you have a website, obviously. What's that website?
We're Texas Crime Victims United. The website is tcvu.org. There's a membership application for people that want to become members. We'll be doing newsletters and educational videos soon. All of our supported legislation is on our site. There's galleries to all the events we've been to. And then there's links if you just need to talk to somebody. Email me. That's the marketing email that's on there. Each person has, you click on us, it has our contact info. I am always willing to listen. I am always willing to offer support um, to anybody that's been a victim. And sometimes people just need to have somebody listen and understand what they've been through. It's real hard to talk to a therapist that's never been a victim of a violent crime. Talking to somebody else that has been a victim of a violent crime, um, it makes a difference. Like, I can't give you professional therapy, but I can give you guidance, offer empathy, support, and the biggest all, a hug.
Yeah.
Have somebody hold your hand when you go to court. Sitting in court by myself was hard. I didn't have anybody sitting there holding my hand and explaining. I've done this for multiple people. Like, I'll just show up so you're not by yourself.
Yeah.
And learning all of this, being able to explain, like, okay, this is what this hearing means. This is typically what they do in this type of setting. Understand it's going to get reset. Here's who this is. This is what this player does. And this is how you should write your impact statement, helping them write down their pain, so that it comes across in the court of law as a powerful voice for their loved one or themselves. And so I'm always willing to help and talk and listen, offer resources. We'll eventually, we're working on our educational part, where we're going to have more resources on the website. We're going to be doing videos to explain every portion of the criminal justice system. You are a victim. What happens next? and then every part of the process after that.
That's
We'll
really
have
awesome.
up. We're going to, links to resources, um, and we have, they've been fixing the crime victims compensation fund for Texas is kind of, it's been pretty shitty for a while. They're working on getting that fixed. It's a very impossible application process. I don't think any of us ever successfully got any compensation from the fund, but I know that Paxton's office had been working on getting a lot of that fixed, getting the staffing in there to help with the backlog. So in the meantime, what resources do we have? Each other. Um, so even if it's just to bring more attention to a case that someone feels is not getting enough attention, having news conferences, press releases, or even just offering a listening ear. We are all here at any time. We all have our different types of crimes and different backgrounds, so we all can bring something to offer help or find somebody that will.
Man,
So we want to network all of the victims in Texas and all the victims nationwide. We're here. So fill out the membership application on our website, tcvu.org. It does take us a few days to go through the applications as we vet people. And then, we definitely will be in contact. But always email, hit that marketing email, and it comes to me and Jessica, who's my partner in marketing. She's been through some really shitty stuff. Her fiance was murdered, and so she and I, we work hand in hand and have for years. So we both get the same emails. It'll come to both of us, and there's always going to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always going to be somebody responding.
man, wow. Um, I don't even honestly, I don't even know what to say. That was really awesome. Um, again, what I gathered from you, you're in the same sense as me. We came on to tell your life warrior story, which you did, but you spent we spent way more time talking about other people,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and it's exactly why I do this. It's the same reason, I went through my shit too, and came to that realization that, you know, it's like my dad always said, the legacy you leave behind is the important thing. Money and all that is okay. It's helpful, but that runs out eventually, and it's and that's how it's the same thing I'd tell guys in the fire department when I leave. And I had guys I worked with, and you're like, man, you're an asshole. Like nobody likes you. And when you leave here, you're gonna see your picture on the wall, and 25 years from now, they're gonna walk by and they go, "Who was that guy?" And they were like, I heard he was a fucking asshole. Nobody liked that guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's your legacy forever. And it's like, well, I want my picture on the wall and go, "Hey, who's that?" I was Kevin McAdams. He was cool as hell. Like, he liked his guys. He was fun to be around. He was,
Mm-hmm.
he cared about people. That's the legacy. And, you know, and so that's exactly what you're trying to do. I feel like that's exactly what I'm trying to do is leave something behind that stays here forever, that grows so big that it can't die, and that
Yes.
it stays here forever, and that'll be your legacy. And so, man, really awesome. I'm glad you came on. I was
Thank.
excited about it in the first place just because talking about Texas crime victims per se, but you gave way more than I was expecting, and
I got
and
in here, and my hard drive is full. Uh, and I appreciate because the platform is necessary. The outreach is necessary because there are people, like I said, I spent so long um, not asking for help, and that was my downfall. And I want people to know that there is help. Um, Even if it's, I'm not a therapist, but I give good hugs.
yeah,
I listen with both ears. And um, if I would have had that, I think then I wouldn't have stayed in that marriage for as long, but that was very self-imposed victimization. I stayed because my brain told me I needed to. I was manipulated into thinking that that was where I needed to be. And so then finally getting out and getting help I should have asked for years before. Like I said, it was very astounding to me to realize that if you don't ask for help, you kind of just self
Yeah.
load and hold it all in, and that can be very very hard. And so there's no perfect way to grieve. There is no perfect way to grieve. And I watch how society treats people that have gone through very traumatic experiences and how people react. And I would see the ugly comments to Jocelyn's mom, like, "Oh, you're not crying enough on TV." And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
so we don't know how to compose ourselves in public because I didn't want to go in public when I've got, all these stitches in my face. I've got permanent scars here, here, here. Like, I don't want to go in public either, but you're going to tell me that I'm not crying enough to be a victim. You don't know what I do when I go home. And again, like I said, even after that dinner, we're so proud of all the work we did. And then I spent 3 days, I couldn't even get out of bed, and I'm just sitting there crying, and my anxiety's high, and it's just like, oh, I just all these people, and what are they going to say, and what are people going to write about it? And sure enough, the Harris County Democratic Party started immediately attacking us for,
Of course.
you're
Yeah.
being partisan, and you've just, put yourself out there as a Republican organization, and we're not. Crime is nonpartisan.
Right.
Doofus that robbed me, not a single one of them asked me, what party did I vote for? My
Yep.
AD never asked me. The judge never asked me. Nobody ever asked me, what party are you affiliated with, before I became a victim of a crime? And it didn't matter at all. And again, all of us have different political backgrounds, and we all have our different policy beliefs. Um, so it's really unfair. And it's like, okay, well, so you're upset that the Harris County Republican Party gave us a Courage Award for all of the
Yeah.
courage we had to go
Yeah.
testify in state in front of you, who then turned around and voted no on
Right.
what we testified for. And then you want to throw it in my face? Why don't you give us an award? We'll show up there too.
We're trying to protect you too. Right?
Yes.
Like we're trying to protect your kids and your family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
And so it's like you're just like you being a first responder, you're running into areas where people don't like you
yeah.
just because of your job.
Yeah.
And do you still do it? Absolutely. Do
Yeah.
firefighters run in a house that's burning down, whether that person's been talking shit?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do cops go out in the street and protect the same people that say fuck the police all day? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we do. We're personally attacked all the time.
Yeah.
And it's gross. It's really
Yeah.
gross.
I
And
used to say, I used to say, and I still do. I always say, yeah, there's only because I'll talk about race and religion and sexuality, all those things, and I try and tell people like, look, there's only two things in this entities in this world that don't discriminate. That's God and death. It doesn't matter what color your hair is or what race you are or what. Those two things don't discriminate. But I feel like now I have to add one, and and it's true. Criminals and violent criminals, they don't either. They don't care what religion. They don't care what if you're a Republican or Democrat. They don't care what color your hair is. They don't care. It doesn't matter.
mhm,
None of that plays into it at all. There's no discrimination in it,
it
and
should
for
be.
politicians to
Mhm,
use it as a tool. Man, again, it makes me hate and makes me not like politicians more and more all the time. Can't stand
100%.
them.
100%. And so as I sit there and I said that, we are the victims as well. We're poor minority people. But you feel that the only way that they're listening to the party and not the people.
Yeah,
And so they have this agenda of what they have to do. And we had state reps that sat on the committee that just flat out ignored us, got up and walked out, and while we're testifying, and then ACLU comes to sit down, and oh, here they come running right back, and they want to, oh yes, thank you so much for being here for your story. And I'm like, you so much for the story for the guy that had 7 felonies and went to prison. but you walked out on my story. I've never been to prison.
Right.
So feel sorry for me. You feel sorry for him. And, they said, oh, we're going to have, before the committee hearing even started, they said, we're going to have this press release on the Capitol steps. The Harris County, not the Harris County, the Texas Democratic Party decided that they were going to have this news conference on the steps of the Capitol an hour before the hearing was supposed to start and give us their safety plan that they had, which was totally opposite of what we were trying to go for.
Of course.
And I sit there and I look at who they had there. Texas Organizing Project, Pure Justice, all these abolish police, abolish prison, let everybody out of jail for people. And they're parading them around, and we're all standing there outside, and they're talking about how it was horrible in jail. And, well, don't go to jail, first of all.
Yeah.
There's one way to fix that, and it's don't commit crime. And I will never dismiss the small minority of people that are wrongfully accused. I know it
Yeah.
happens. I've
It
seen it.
does. Yeah. 100%.
But I do that, but we're talking 1% out of 100% that are innocent. And there's a process for that. That's why you have due process. You have your attorney, you go to court, you have your appeals process, all of these things. And so, but we can't dismiss 99% because of the 1%.
Right.
And so to have them paraded in front of us as we're standing there, I'm standing there next to somebody whose mom was murdered, somebody's kid was murdered. I'm there, all these people that are there to support us. And they didn't ever say a thing to us. They didn't ever ask us a question. They didn't have us up there talking about this. They had everybody up there that, well, I went to jail. I was arrested and I couldn't get out. And I was sat there for 3 months and I lost custody of my kids. Well, why were you stealing? Why were you robbing people? And now you want me to care about your kids getting taken away from you when I couldn't even be happy in my own home as a victim and my child suffered for it.
Yeah.
Because it's time, he's playing soccer and baseball and having things at school. I don't want to leave my house. And so my parents and my husband, everybody's doing all this with him. That's time I don't get back. One of the robberies happened right before we went. It was the first vacation I'd taken in 5 years. We were going to Colorado as a family, all of us, and I got robbed 2 days before we flew out. And I sat there in our Airbnb crying like a little wimp, writing victim impact statements, talking to the district attorney's office, and everybody's outside skiing and sledding and having a good time. And I don't even want to leave the room. I don't want to see people. I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to be outside. I'm grouchy. I'm snapping at my family. And they don't see that part. They just see, well, jail was hard.
Yeah. Well, I always say, and I've had there was a guy on my podcast before. His name's Aubrey McDade Jr. and he was Navy Cross recipient, which is one step below the Medal of Honor. He was a Marine, but he grew up in what he called Funky Town, bad part of Fort Worth for a while. Mm-hmm. Then circumstances brought him to Fifth Ward, Fourth Ward, Houston, mm-hmm. And he talked about his life there. And, it was always, it didn't matter where he was. It was always drugs and always, robbing and, these things that he was always around. And he was victimized too at a young age, by a relative and sexually. And just this whole thing that he went through. But at the same time, he'll tell you, even in that, I knew what right and wrong was. He'll tell you, I know when I'm doing something wrong that I could be punished for. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's that. There's nobody on the planet. There might be some people that are twisted because of their circumstances, things they've lived through in their life, whatever. But there's nobody that doesn't have a sense of going, if I do this, it's against the law or it's completely wrong, whatever. And so then it comes down to a personal choice.
Yes.
So then at that point, I don't want to hear anything about, okay, you lived this life and it was terrible and all that. I hate that for you. But at that moment, you made a personal choice
Mm-hmm.
And now you put that personal choice and all of your shit on Michelle Chapa at the AT&T store, and you force that on her now too. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, it's hard for me to have sympathy for you.
Yes, and they're teaching that when they're not being held responsible, there's no accountability. They're learning that there's no
Yeah,
there's no consequence for their actions, and so those choices are now easily being made to
yeah,
continue to commit crime because they can get away with it. And so, as when we had our launch a few months ago, the president of our organization, Paul Castro, he said it too. He's an educator, and he says, he hears the conversations all the time about low income minority kids in school, and they should be treated differently. And he said, no, 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 don't. You need to treat them with the same respect that you treat other kids. Like they shouldn't be like, oh, you can just excuse that because you hold them to the same, give them the same standard, give them the same respect. Some of us grew up, like I said, in a very bad area. He did as well, and he said it. He said, I have murdered as many people in my life as I have ever wanted to murder, and that was zero. I have robbed as many people in my life as I've wanted to rob, and that was zero. So even no matter how we were raised, I was raised in a single parent home in a bad side of town, and I made the choice not to go to places that I knew things were going to happen. My friends are talking about we're going to go rob these people. We're going to, as they would say on Fridays when they knew that all, and this is where I go back to like immigrants are being victimized. These guys work for cash and they get paid on Fridays. And then they go to Western Union and they send money home and they go get their beer. And it was like every Friday, they're like, oh, we're going to go roll some wetbacks. So, and because they knew they would have a large amount of cash on them and then they weren't going to call the cops. And
yeah,
so it's, I'm not going. We're going to go jump this dude. I'm not going. I made a choice even as a teenager that isn't what I wanted to do. I'm not here to hurt people because it's easy. I'm not here to rob people because it's easy. I learned my work ethic from my dad. He was very like, you work for what you get. We're not on welfare. We're not on food stamps. Get your ass
awesome.
work, and then the one thing he would always tell you, if you're on time, you're late. And so I always show up early. I'm at work, my ethics there. I know that I have to work for what I want. But then, it's like as other people like, oh, well, I'm going to get a car for my birthday or, I'm going to do this and that. And my dad's like, get a job for your birthday. How about that? But what it taught me was that when I had to work for it and I had to pay for it, I certainly did appreciate it a whole lot more than something that was handed to me. So I have appreciated everything that I've gotten in my life. I have appreciated my freedom. I have appreciated the fact that I am a law abiding citizen and I can walk out my door without looking over my shoulder to see if there's cops there to serve a warrant or be a bounty hunter because I didn't go to court. I have the freedom to do what I want. And I appreciate that because I earned it because I put the work in for it.
Yeah,
And to have people out there that now I have to be more protective of my loved ones and stay inside more, not go to Walmart at night, not run to HEB after 9 o'clock kind of thing. Um, it's because of the choices they made that they weren't held accountable for. And it's just become, society has become so accepting and so numb to crime
yeah.
that it's used and it's celebrated in a lot of
Well,
things.
it's
Yeah, like
same
what's
thing. California. It's like,
yes.
yeah, you can walk into whatever Target you want and just take whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So these are, yeah,
Retail theft is nonviolent. I beg to differ.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's
No.
easy. It's easy to say when it's not you.
Mm-hmm. And
So
even would have just snatch and grabs. They come in and they would just snatch the demo phones, or they would, ask you to get something out of safe to look at, and they run off with it, whatever. We'd have people injured during that, just a snatch and grab. So it's like they knock you down, or you know, whatever, they ripped the wall off and then I literally landed on somebody. The display was pulled completely off the wall. Like those kinds of things that they're still considered shoplifting, nonviolent. But again, domestic violence, a lot of those are nonviolent. Anytime that you oppress somebody without their freedoms, without, you know, having a fear of something happened, in my opinion, is violent.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And
Even
the
if it's just a threat of it.
yes, even the threat of violence is violent. And so the laws have been changing more to where it's excused. They're trying to change the definition of violent crime. And that's really gross because you're making society very accepting to it. You know, you think about when we grew up, you know, I grew up in the 80s, and um, you knew where to stay away from. You know, you don't go to that street, don't go to that
Right.
neighborhood, and those people are out of control. But when and somebody go to jail and you didn't tell anybody, you didn't say my uncle's in prison. It's just like that uncle just disappeared. Okay,
Yeah.
people weren't celebrating it, and now it's being celebrated. Oh yeah, my uncle, he killed these people, but I don't know, he's in
Yeah.
prison. And you know, free my homeboy, free my uncle. And I'm watching this in my own neighborhood, you know, and not all of us made it out. I had friends killed. I have friends I grew up with that are still in TDC to this day. One of my best friends is doing life for capital murder. And I still talk to him twice a month. He's still one of my best friends, and he gives me a lot of great information from the inside. We do have to work on prison reform too. That's another thing that we've brought up. Like, we can't continue to advocate for safer streets, knowing that it's going to put more people in jail. So we have to then also reform. You know, Paul Castro, he was attacked. So his son's murderer was sent to prison. And they went through this whole thing during the summer about how there's no AC in the majority of the Texas prisons, right? And he said, this man murdered my son, but it doesn't mean that I want him to not have air conditioning and live in inhumane um, conditions. And people were so upset. Like, how would you not want him to be living in inhumane? We're still, that doesn't make us any better.
Right.
Doesn't make us
Yeah.
any. And so we do need to reform the prison system, and we do need to make it so that people do integrate back into society successfully, having better programs for that, having the anger management and the rehab and the school and the trade programs. All of that is very vital, and I think needs a lot more attention. But you do that after they're sentenced. You don't do it in place of punishment. And so
Yeah.
that's what they're doing now. They said, we're going to you know, Sean Tier, our district attorney here in Harris County, he sat there, and I watch the video of it all the time. It just irritates me. He said, I want to do away with all terms of probation, and I want to offer trade programs to people that have been charged with crime. And typically, when you do a diversion, a lot of times you'll take a lower plea, you do the diversion, and you could plead to a lower thing. What he's offering now is to put people through the trade union, get them a trade certificate, and if they successfully finish that and get their trade certificate, their charges will be dismissed. Not pled to a lower crime, dismissed completely. So now you
So yeah,
a
it's like the victim is like, hey, sorry.
there's no justice.
Like it
Your
never happened to you.
is now put into a paid internship program to learn how to be a plumber, learn how to be an electrician, and then their charges are dismissed. So you never got your day in court. They do not have a criminal record, and now they are at Mima's house fixing her toilet.
And
And Mima,
your
I,
tax dollars went to pay for his education.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Gosh, oh
it is
man.
bad. So it's like I
Yeah.
understand that wanting to help people, and it's like it's going to help with recidivism. It's going to keep recidivism down. People aren't going to reoffend. They reoffend because they still need money, and so if
Right.
they have a criminal record, they can't get jobs. And I'm sorry, but I wasn't the one that committed a crime. They should never have charges dismissed and
Right.
placed any sort of punishment or anything on their record. Most misdemeanors you can get expunged after a certain period of years. So yeah, suffer because it's hard for them to find a place to live. I don't flipping care. It's
Yeah.
hard me to find a place to live too, because I have to make sure I'm on the
Right.
corner. I can see both streets. I know who my neighbor, like
Right.
it, we're not the same. In the meantime, like I went into debt because I couldn't work. I'm going through, I have $250,000 in medical debt. Like it's insane all the debt that I went into. I have those issues as well, trying to be able to, buy a home or move
Yeah.
some. And so, but you can't offer diversions and trade programs and all of this in place of punishment. These are great to reintegrate into society. Absolutely. Give them the rehab, the trade programs, the anger management, all of that. Prepare them to come back and be successful in society. Or why don't you offer these programs to kids before they commit crime? Fix your community.
Yep.
You don't do it instead of. You
Yeah.
do it before and you do it after.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of the reform, that while I am fighting to keep violent offenders in jail, I understand that there are harsh conditions in jail too. I want to reform both sides because there's a lot of victims that are in prison.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of victims that are in prison, and a lot of people that become victims in prison. And
Yep.
anybody listening, listen, I don't care where you were or what you were doing when you became a victim. I don't care if you're an inmate. I don't hate inmates.
Yeah.
I love people and I hate people all at the same time.
Yep.
Um, and so it's like I don't care. I had one in Montgomery County who was a victim and didn't tried to report a guard for inappropriate things, and nobody was really listening, and they'd kind of accepted it. And so I reached out to a politician, I'll leave unnamed, in the area, and 2 days later, that guard was arrested. They were able to gather the evidence, get the videos, get the statements from the inmates. And I said, I don't care what you are in jail for. The fact is you became a victim when you were in jail, and let's work on that.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I don't want to just throw everybody in prison for the rest of their lives. I do
Right.
believe in rehabilitation. I do believe in reform. I do believe that some people cannot be fixed. But I do believe that a lot of people are. So if you're able to get into your community and mentor these kids and get them into these programs prior to them becoming a criminal, you're going to be a million times more successful than letting them do it in place of punishment, because you've already told them that they don't have to be accountable, and then you have just then made somebody else a victim. Somebody else is going to die. You're going to put them in a home where a plumbing company is going to run a background check, and they now have no background because it was dismissed,
Yeah.
and they're going to send them into Mima's house, and she's a vulnerable victim. And temptation is the devil's biggest game,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen. And I'm not saying if, it's when. It's going to happen. This type of program is going to be an absolute disaster, and we're going to end up with more and more victims who no longer want to go through life
Right.
because all they did was hire a plumber and
Right. Yeah.
or get an electrician to come install a ceiling fan to make it comfortable for their kids in that room. And something bad is going to happen. And then how do you live with that? You're victimized by somebody you brought into your own home.
Yeah.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. And so, like I said, there's no perfect way to grieve. There's no perfect way to get over things. And I think with all of us working together, we will all be able to add a missing piece of the puzzle to everybody's trauma. Um, you bring what I don't bring. I bring what you can't bring, vice versa.
Yeah.
The work needs to be out there. Nobody is ever alone. I felt alone and I didn't ask for help. And then when I did, I realized that the whole time, I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
Alone. And so now, like I said, I still talk to some of my employees that, we're all still very, very close. I'm still there for them. we haven't worked together in years, but these are still my kids. One of them she's going to college. She's going to school for criminal justice. One of them's a firefighter with HPD. One of
Awesome.
them, police officer for Humble ISD. Like, these kids have gone on because they also made the choice to help people and to change the future of other people, to not become like us. And I think that all of us in our group, that we have been able to rely on each other, be each other's missing puzzle pieces. Even with my kids, they see, what I'm doing. It motivated them to also, instead of dwelling and not asking for help, they were able to ask for the help and want to do more. And I want to do that too. I want to do that too. I want to help people. I want to help
Yeah,
people. None of
that's
us.
the legacy.
Yes. And so they have decided, and I'm just so proud of every single one of them, to make their change in the community, with what they're doing now. And I'm too old to go back to school. I would, but I'm no thank you. I hard
Trust me, I did it. I went and got my master's degree at like 40. I don't remember what it was. Holy shit.
Yeah, no thank you. I don't
Yeah,
want to. I have a lot of work to do already, but and then my son's in school, so it's like he's in middle school, and I can hardly do homework with him anymore. I'm just like, call grandma. Grandma's a teacher.
terrible. I
Um,
tell my son just graduated from TCU, and he's jumped in this thing with me. He's marketing degree, and
um,
and uh, and so he's jumped in, and he's helping me now. We're gonna go take our our stuff in a different direction. He wants to make it LifeWarrior clothing brand and go in this fitness space and all this stuff, and which
amazing.
is
Oh,
cool. I'm like, it's fun to I'm but he also, I'm proud of him because he agrees with the message. Okay, we're gonna do this, but the message is still the same. We're gonna, people go to work out. There's a reason they go work out. They're there to get past something, trauma, whatever it is. They're there. That's their therapy,
mhm.
and which is the same for me. And so we're gonna we're gonna use that to carry on the message. So, but I always tell him, I'm like, he's like, finally, I'm done with school. I'm like, buddy,
No.
no, you ain't. There's gonna be tests, and there's gonna be homework, and it may not be with TCU, but it's gonna be with somebody. It just never ends. Just is what it is. Part of
It's
life, right?
you mean I'm done. I am
Yeah,
done at 47. I'm not ever. No, thank you.
yeah. But you do your own homework. It's only homework. It's research and all that. It's a different kind of homework.
Yes,
And,
I well in data,
yeah.
and my husband dwells in the gym.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
does when he's got things going on, he's hitting the
yeah.
weight, and
Yep.
I'm the books, and it's
Yep.
how we work well together. I
Well,
am
man,
allergic
I'm
to
go ahead.
weightlifting.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. It's all right. You got to find what fit in, get in where you fit in, right?
I'm allergic. Leave me on the treadmill. I'm fine. No, no, I'm not allergic
You
to
got
it.
at least you're doing something.
Yeah, I'll take the treadmill and the bike. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lift weights. That's him. Reading is how I heal. Learning,
Yeah,
expands my mind, and talking to other people, getting experience. One lawyer is going to have different experience than another. One inmate's going to have different experience than another. Same with victims, and same with firefighters and LEOs and everything else, right? So I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of talking. I do a lot of interviewing, and it's so funny because I'm such an introvert. And again, I love people and I hate people at the same time. I love people, just not a whole bunch around me, right?
yeah,
And so I have a personal bubble. I need you to, hey, let's not do that, and don't be on speakerphone in public, because now we're all involved in your conversation.
uh,
Kind of
yeah,
like I still believe in like personal privacy bubbles.
yeah,
So, but I love talking and learning. And the biggest way to learn is by talking to people and asking questions. And so
yep,
I did that for a long time because every part of the criminal justice system has a default or a defect in it. Until everything can get fixed, there's always going to be a miss somewhere. There's not a single department that is perfect, and there's no perfect way to fix it. All we can do is try to make it better. And I've had great conversations with most of the law enforcement here in Harris County, our sheriff, our constables, and it's so funny how all of us are so much on the same page, but we can't get the courts to be on the same page. And so when we talk about trauma and the sights that you see and the smell of blood and seeing those kinds of things, it affects our law enforcement officers and our firefighters and all of our first responders so greatly. And then that same person will get out of jail and do it again. And it's like, you went through all of that for what? You went through that for what? And I have cops picking up the same guys. Like they're literally arresting the same person a month later, and they just saw the traumatic scene from the last crime, and they're back again, and it gets to you. And so they don't realize that they're not just victimizing victims in
Yeah.
Harris County with this bullshit. You're victimizing our law enforcement officers
Yeah.
who are having um a hard time with mental health. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a mental beat down. What am I even doing? Why am I even doing this job? I'm getting a shitty paycheck. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for what I do and all the time I put in, and and
Yeah, they're
then
right on
and then
saying
nobody on the back end's helping me out. No judges, nobody's helping me out.
and
It's like
they,
I'm out here trying to fight a war, and I get no help from anybody.
mm-hmm. It's very demoralizing. It's very demoralizing. And so I see it all the time. I talk to my cops, I talk to my firefighters, and they call me from scenes sometime, and they're like, just this is one of the worst crime scenes I've ever walked into, and they don't know how to talk. And then there's always just this stigma in the departments that, yeah, you don't call a therapist, you're a cop, suck it up, you're a
Yep.
firefighter, suck it up.
Yep.
Right? Like, show up to your shift the next day, and you close your eyes and you see this. When I lived in Austin, I worked at Brackenridge Trauma Center, and that was before Dell Children's Hospital was built across the highway. The Children's Hospital trauma was connected to Breck. And so when I would work shifts at BRAC, they would always say, like, and I was a financial counselor. I dealt with everybody that was a crime victim, a victim of a trauma, people that didn't have insurance, that had very expensive bills, try to get them funding. Seton was a charity hospital, right? So we had grants and funding and the crime victims. So anyway, and they started telling me, can I take all these shifts at Children's because they're short staffed? And I realized very quickly why they're short staffed. I can deal with adults and what they do to themselves. If you are driving drunk and you're mangled, that's on you, bro. But
Yeah.
to see these kids come in abused and burned and raped and mutilated, my hair was falling out. I couldn't sleep, so I was pulling double shifts because I wasn't going to go to sleep anyway. So I'd work 12 hours at one hospital and 12 hours at the next. I was working days on end at a time until I would just completely exhaust myself and fall out because
Yep.
I couldn't sleep. You see these images over and over and over, and you would see it a whole lot more often than I would working, in a financial office at a trauma center. Those types of things, and then when people aren't held accountable for that, it feels like, why did I even see that?
Yeah.
Why did I see
Yeah.
I had to see that, and this family has to live through that, and then what was the point? And what do you do with that question?
Yeah.
You
Well,
implement change,
yeah.
and that's where we are.
For me, it was always, I finally figured out, trying to figure it out is what will drive you fucking crazy.
Hmm.
And for 7 years of my stuff, it was like, how come I did CPR on a 3-month-old and they only got three and didn't survive, but I did CPR on a 103-year-old and she lived another year and she didn't even want to be here anymore. It's
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
and I did CPR on 13-year-olds and you're like, you when you try to start making sense of it, that's what drives you fucking crazy. You just realize you're not in
There,
control here. The only thing you can do is do your best to try to help people, and that's, you know, And that's what kind of took the pressure off, was that, like, okay, let's go do something to help people, and I'm not gonna worry about that because I can't control that. It's like, control the things you can control. That's it.
One of my coworkers is his favorite thing to say, control the controllables.
Yeah,
Uh, and it has become, there's two things that he's taught me over the years, trust but verify, and control the controllables. And those two things have driven me. Like, I can only control so much. Um, and so if I can't get politicians here locally to listen, I'm going to the state.
yeah,
And we did. So if we can't get the judges to do what they're supposed to do, then we will untie their hands. And now they don't have a choice to be so discretionary, in setting bail amounts and having an unelected hearing officer setting bail amounts for violent criminals, letting illegals out of jail that have committed a violent crime. And they brought up, Mitch Little is probably one of the smartest attorneys I've ever witnessed. Um, in my entire life, on TV, off TV. Mitch Little's a brilliant attorney, and he would bring the numbers, and he said, we're talking about a very, very strict set of crimes, the worst of the worst violent crimes that would be something that somebody could be held in jail without bail for. And they're making this huge deal about it, that we would have just this influx of people, all these people just merely accused of a crime, that are being held without bail. And he said, in reality, we're looking at like less than 2,000 people statewide, that are repeat violent offenders that have committed another violent crime. This isn't for first time. This isn't for low level nonviolent. This is for very violent habitual people. The judges should have the discretion to hold them without bail if they've then been accused again in a violent crime. And they just couldn't get past that somebody could be accused and held without bail. We already have that option in the state of Texas right now. It's only for capital murder. Um, and you have a proof evident hearing, and the prosecutor has to show why they believe they should be held without bail. And ultimately the decision is on the judge to decide whether or not they're going to hold somebody without bail. So what we wanted to do with that is expand our constitution to add these small set of very violent, um, offenses done by somebody who's already been convicted of violent crime, so that we don't have these repeats. And then, SJR 87, dealing with illegals that are charged with that very same small set of violent crimes. And the Democrats just couldn't wrap their heads around, um, holding violent people in jail. And I watched rep after rep go up there and say, I represent an area that's an immigrant community, and you're wanting to keep these people in jail. These people look like me. And I'm looking at this dude standing there in a $500 suit,
yeah.
haircut, and I'm just like, you don't look shit like the dudes that we're
No,
trying to keep in jail with the
no.
face tattoos. They've murdered 3 people. They don't look like you, buddy. Just
Yeah,
because you're Latino and they're Latino, I don't look like
yeah,
these people.
yeah.
I'm Mexican, and I will never say these people look like me just because we're both brown. They don't look like me. They look like
Like,
me.
it's like I always say, it's like, okay, if you're that, okay, go wear your $500 suit down there and hang out with them for a couple weeks.
Go sit in
Live
it.
live with them. See how it goes for you.
Mm-hmm.
See how long that $500 suit stays on you, and your
Mm-hmm.
wallet stays with you, and
Your wife.
see if they feel the same way. You're like them.
Mm-hmm. So I say, put yourself in my shoes. I'm not a police.
Yeah,
I don't have a private security detail. I don't have, it's not, uh, you know, uh, I'm not a public servant that there's a higher penalty for if something happens to me, right? Like, I don't drive a BMW. I don't live in $1 million home. I don't live in a gated community. Spend a day in my shoes and
yeah,
understand the struggles of having to pay for groceries or having to pay the light bill, and then having the anxiety of, I'm able-bodied. And then, do I work in an office? No, I can't, because I can't, the noises, the people around me. So I'm very limited to what type of job I will take, because otherwise I'm going to end up in a mental institution, right?
Yeah.
So it's like all of these things. We're not in the same shoes, buddy, or
Yeah.
we're not living the same life. And you want to tell me how, how hard you think it is for somebody in prison. You wouldn't be singing the same tune if that you let out on bail murdered your child.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest, I want to say funny, but it was kind of funny to me. The judge that I had in most of my cases, he was a real piece of work, man, this dude. And he had been arrested for domestic violence 10 years or so ago. I think it was like 15 years at this point. And she ended up, recanting, dismissing the charges. And he was just a hearing officer at the time. And then he got elected to the bench. And he was one of the worst possible judges we had in Harris County. And then he was arrested over New Year's Eve for, again, beating up his girlfriend, and was arrested for domestic violence again, right? This is a judge. And he was arrested in Galveston County. He said he would take time off. He would, consider what was going on. And then I read his bond conditions. He was not allowed to have ammunition. He was not allowed to have a weapon. And his lawyer filed against that, saying, no, he deals with very violent people every single day. He should be allowed to have his gun and his ammunition. And it was the funniest, most ironic thing to me. You want to keep your gun and your ammo because you said you deal with very violent people every day. These are the same fucking people you let out of jail for $1. So it's okay for them to be out here with me,
Yeah.
but not with you when you're not armed. But I have to be
Yeah.
as a mom, right? Like, what? What makes you so special?
Well,
Because you deal with the very same violent people that you released from jail, that you should be allowed to keep your weapons when you violently assaulted your girlfriend. And then this piece of shit, and I'll never say it any other way, he killed himself. Driving drunk, left a Texans game, highly intoxicated. He was 3 times over the legal limit, drove his car into a pole, arguing with his girlfriend. And so I'm not going to say he died in a car accident. No, he killed himself because he was
yeah.
drunk. And he
Yeah.
always was. He was that drunk, and he was a judge, and here he is making these decisions that put my life in
Right.
absolute upside down hell. This
Yeah.
very same judge was out there living the life that he would hold people accountable for. And so he can be out there drinking and driving and beating people up, and then he was going to sit on the bench and judge other people. Well,
Yeah.
no wonder he was letting everybody out of jail.
Well, I think that's a microcosm of the world right now. So,
And so that's what
man,
it's doing.
crazy. It's definitely a crazy world we live in.
And I don't want it to be. I know you don't want it to be. And that's why we're both here
Yeah.
doing what we do, because this is not what the world used to be when we grew up. And it is not the world that I want for my son when he grows up.
No, not
Um,
at all.
you have your piece of the puzzle. I do my piece of the puzzle, and we'll all continue to work together. And anybody else that has a missing piece of the puzzle, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
It's now come down to the people have to implement the change because our government is not going to do it. Uh,
100%. Yeah.
so unfortunately, we're both necessary, Mark, and we will be. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
Been
And
awesome.
we'll talk more. I know we will. I was so glad to have met you so randomly in
Yeah.
a half hour line. That was good times.
No,
Uh,
yeah. I'm in my head this whole time. I'm thinking, okay, we got to do something. Because I'm always trying to figure out ways to partner with people and stuff and get my message out. And I always tell people, I'm not afraid to get your message out too. It's like, that's how this works. And, so we'll talk again. We'll stay in touch and figure something out. I'm glad to help in any way I can. And I know my wife will, knowing she'll hear the story and she'll be all over it.
I'm ready.
Because she has conversations with fairly frequently with the assistant attorney general of Texas and doing what they do with pedophiles and this whole thing. So she probably gonna have some questions for you. So
Answers, and if I don't have the answers, I'll go get them.
yep. Well, Michelle, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story, but telling everything else too. I mean, I think it's going to be great. I think people are going to latch onto it, and there's a lot of great information you gave. And so I appreciate you coming on the podcast and doing that. And man, awesome. I thought it was really awesome. So I'm appreciative that you took the time on a Saturday to do it. So thank you very much for that, y'all. I'll post it here pretty soon. Y'all go check out our website, tcvu.org.
Correct.
And reach out. Let them help you if you need it. And if you need information from me, I'll get you in touch with them somehow. So thanks for following. Y'all remember, subscribe, pass this along, trying to get the message out to help as many people out there as we can with whatever it is. For me, it's suicide awareness things, helping people understand that you can get past struggle and conflict like Michelle has lived through and still do great things to help people in the world. So we all have a message, and so that's what we're doing here. So much appreciated. Y'all follow, like, and share, and go check out Michelle's stuff. And another podcast coming soon, y'all. Remember, like I always say, go help somebody that needs help. I promise you, if you do, your life will get better. So that's it. All right, Michelle. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely.